I'd been working on the old Chevy for hours. The air in the shop was thick with grease and gasoline, my hands slick from the job. I didn't notice the cut at first, just a sting, then a drip of blood that soaked through my glove and onto the hood. It wasn't deep, just a nick really, but the pain hit me hard. My mind was already somewhere else, but the sting brought me back. I wiped it off on a rag, gritted my teeth, and kept working. Rachel texted me, canceled the vacation plans we'd talked about for weeks. Her message was brief, almost like it was no big deal. Found a better deal online, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Just like that. A vacation we'd planned for months, for the family. Gone because she found some better rates. Frustration bubbled up inside me. The kind that's been sitting there for a while, but hasn't found a way out. A decade of blood, sweat, and grease in this shop, keeping everything afloat. And for what? To have her cancel on me like it was nothing. Dad, you okay? Ben's voice cut through the fog in my head. I looked up. He was standing in the backyard, his face a little scrunched, the kind of look a kid gets when they're worried but don't know how to say it. Yeah, buddy. It's nothing. I waved him off, but something in the air between us felt heavier than usual. I glanced over at the window, where Rachel was pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, talking with her friends like everything was fine. Like I wasn't here, working myself to the bone for our family while she made plans I wasn't even included in. My hand throbbed, but it wasn't the blood or the pain that bothered me most. It was the distance between us. The way she didn't even notice I was in the shop anymore. The way she didn't care. Something had shifted. I couldn't tell when it happened, but I could feel it now, like a crack in the foundation of everything. And I was the one holding it together, patching up walls no one else saw. Rachel didn't even look at me when she left. Just grabbed her bags, kissed me on the cheek, and said, I'll check in. Don't miss me too much, okay? I didn't say anything back. Couldn't think of a thing that would come out right. So I just nodded and let her go. The door closed behind her with a thud, and the house felt quieter, emptier somehow. I stayed in the garage, trying to keep busy, trying not to think about how Rachel had already turned the page, moving on to her wellness retreat, leaving me with a stack of unpaid bills and an ever-growing list of things I couldn't fix. Ben came out to the garage a few minutes later, dragging an old bike behind him, the tires flat, the frame rusty. He looked at me with that hopeful smile, the one that always made me want to be a better father than I felt like. Dad, can you show me how to fix it? He asked, his voice light, but his eyes searching for something more. Maybe a distraction. I let out a long breath and forced a smile. Sure, kiddo. Let's see what we can do. The bike was a mess, but it gave us something to focus on. I showed him how to fix the brakes, how to check the gears, how to clean the rust off with a rag and some elbow grease. It felt good, actually. Not just fixing the bike, but fixing something, anything, after feeling so helpless in everything else. But as we worked, a nagging thought kept eating at me. Rachel's trip, the money she spent, the stuff she bought. She wasn't exactly known for being frugal, but it felt like something more this time. A gut feeling I couldn't shake. Later that afternoon, I went through the house to grab some tools. On my way to the back closet, I noticed Rachel's purse on the counter. It was open, her wallet half visible inside. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. And that's when I found the receipts. They weren't for groceries or kids' clothes, the usual stuff. No, these were for high-end retreats, spa packages, expensive wellness products. Things I hadn't even heard of. She'd charged a few $100 here, 1,000 there. And it wasn't just one or two receipts. They were spread out across the last few months, small purchases adding up like bricks in a wall I hadn't seen coming. I stood there, staring at the receipts. The weight of the bills, the stress of keeping this house going, it all piled up in my chest. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything about it yet. Maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe it was Rachel's way of coping, I told myself. I brushed it off, stuffed the receipts back in her purse, and went back to Ben. But it wouldn't leave my head. It felt like a spark had been lit, and no matter how much I tried to blow it out, the fire kept getting bigger. Rachel's little weekend escape didn't seem like an innocent retreat anymore. The next few days passed slowly. Rachel checked in a few times, but her messages were short. No real updates, just having fun and wish you were here type stuff. It didn't sit right with me, not when I knew what was going on at home. I felt like I was being left behind, and Rachel was already moving on. I spent the weekend with Ben, trying to keep him distracted, teaching him how to change a tire on a bike, trying to make the best of what was turning out to be another lonely weekend. I focused on that, the small moments, the quiet hum of the garage, the scrape of metal against metal. But every time I heard my phone buzz, I couldn't stop the thought from creeping in. What was Rachel really doing? What was she spending all that money on? It was just a nagging feeling, I told myself. I tried to push it down, but it wouldn't go away. I wasn't expecting to find what I did when I checked the PayPal account that morning. It wasn't just the usual charges for stuff around the house. No, this one stood out. A payment to some upscale resort, one I didn't recognize. The price tag was high, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the note attached to the transaction. Can't wait to see you again. All my love, Rachel. I stared at it for what felt like forever, my stomach twisting. There was no reason for Rachel to leave a message like that on a receipt. Not unless it meant something more than what she'd let on. My hands were shaking when I clicked out of the email, but I couldn't stop myself from going deeper. I opened up our joint bank account next, hoping maybe I was just imagining things. I wasn't. There were more charges, other retreats, hotels I didn't know about, luxury stuff I hadn't seen a single receipt for. I wasn't even sure how she was paying for it all, but it didn't matter. The proof was right there, clear as day. I couldn't breathe. My head felt like it was spinning. The lies, the secrets. How long had she been doing this? It hit me all at once, like a punch in the gut. But I wasn't going to let it show. Not yet. Rachel came downstairs a little later, her hair still messy from sleep, rubbing her eyes. She gave me that quick smile she always did before disappearing into her own world. The one that didn't really reach her eyes anymore. "You okay?" she asked, dropping her purse on the counter. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to lose control, didn't want to start screaming or throwing accusations. Instead, I handed her my phone. "Explain this," I said, keeping my voice low but steady. Her face dropped when she saw the PayPal receipt, but she tried to cover it up with a laugh. "Oh, that. It's for the retreat group," she said quickly, her eyes darting to the side. "It's a shared cost for all of us. Just part of the deal." I stared at her, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. "That's not what it says." Rachel froze. Her eyes flickered, but she recovered fast. "I told you, Jack. It's nothing." My pulse was pounding in my ears, but I kept my voice even. "So who's all my love for, then?" She hesitated for a second too long. Then she shook her head, brushing past me. "I don't have time for this right now." That was it. She was walking away like it was nothing. I could feel my hands balling into fists, but I didn't let it show. "Rachel, we need to talk about this. I'm leaving for the retreat in a few hours, Jack. Can't this wait?" I didn't want to drag it out anymore. I knew what I needed to do next. Over the next few days, I dug deeper. I had to know everything. The bank statements didn't lie. More trips, more expensive charges I couldn't ignore. A stay at a luxury hotel in the city, one that wasn't even part of her wellness retreat. I felt my stomach drop every time I uncovered something new. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't trust her, not when everything was falling apart around me. So, I did something I'd never thought I would. I went to a store, bought a GPS tracker, and slapped it on the underside of her car. My heart was pounding in my chest when I did it. I hated that I felt like I had to. But every part of me was telling me that I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I knew this wasn't just about a few bad choices or a couple of questionable purchases. There was something else. And I wasn't going to let it slip away without knowing exactly what was going on. I wrestled with myself. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had everything. So, I kept quiet. Let her think I was oblivious. I wasn't. And now, there was no going back. Saturday morning, I watched Rachel pack her things again, this time for another one of her girls' retreats. She threw her bags in the car with barely a word to me, barely even looking at me as she went through the motions. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was already bracing for what I knew was coming. My finger hovered over the tracker app on my phone, waiting for her to pull out of the driveway. It didn't take long. She was gone by 9:30, and I followed her out of the neighborhood without a second thought. She didn't head toward the retreat like I expected. Instead, she turned left, then another left, cutting through side streets until she ended up in the heart of town, near the fancy apartment complexes that I'd only ever heard about, never seen her mention. I parked a few blocks away, my heart pounding in my chest as I kept an eye on her car. I told myself it was just a mistake, that she had some kind of excuse. But I couldn't shake the tight feeling in my chest, the part of me that knew this wasn't a coincidence. Rachel's car rolled to a stop in front of one of those buildings. My stomach turned when I saw her step out, smoothing her shirt like she was getting ready for something. Then I saw him. Derek. That guy. The one who had always been too familiar, always a little too close to Rachel. They met in front of the building, talking for a second, then a hug. Not just a friendly hug, either. It was a long one that felt too intimate for just friends. They stood there for a minute, just holding on to each other, before walking inside together. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me, but I didn't know what to do with the weight of it. I couldn't stay parked there forever, so I pulled away, my mind racing. I tried to push it down, tried to tell myself I was jumping to conclusions, but every part of me was screaming that this wasn't normal. Not for Rachel. Not for any of this. I called Mike. Mike had been a friend since high school, but he had a different line of work now, private investigator. Not exactly a career I'd ever thought I'd be using, but right then, I didn't care. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Mike, it's Jack. I need your help with something. I tried to keep my voice calm, but the words were tight in my throat. Sure, man. What's going on? I need you to track someone for me, I said, swallowing hard. Derek. You know him. He's close to Rachel's circle, I guess. Derek? You mean the guy she's always running around with? Mike asked, his voice low. He knew the kind of guy Derek was, too. All right, I can look into it. What's he up to? I don't know, Mike. But I need to find out where he's been, where he's going. I don't trust him. Mike hesitated for a second, then let out a sigh. You got it. I'll dig around. You'll hear from me soon. I hung up and stared at my phone for a long time. The world felt unreal. Everything was falling apart, and I didn't know what to do with it. I had Rachel's lies and Derek's touch to deal with. But the hardest part? The hardest part was knowing it wasn't just about me anymore. I needed to keep it together, for Ben. I didn't want him to see this side of things. I didn't want him to feel the weight of what was happening between Rachel and me. So I threw on a half-decent face, grabbed my jacket, and headed to the school to pick him up. The whole drive over, I fought the urge to speed, to pull out of this town and just drive until I couldn't think anymore. But I knew I couldn't. Not for Ben. He was already asking about Rachel, about where she was going, and when she'd be back. The questions kept coming, and I gave him answers that didn't feel like lies, though they were. When I got home with him, I tried to push everything down. But it was impossible. Everything inside me was a storm, and I had no idea how to weather it. The next day, Mike called me with a new piece of evidence. A photo. It was blurry, but it was enough. Derek and Rachel. Together. Not just hanging out, but together. That wasn't a wellness retreat. That wasn't a friendly meeting. My pulse raced when I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't wrong. And now, I had to face the truth. I didn't know how I was going to start, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't live with the lies hanging over me like a shadow anymore. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She didn't notice me at first, too busy flipping through some catalog she'd probably been obsessing over all morning. I didn't even bother to say anything at first. I just laid the folder on the table, heavy with the evidence I'd been collecting over the last few days. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes flickered. Maybe she knew something was coming. Maybe not. Rachel, I said, my voice flat. We need to talk. She put the catalog down and leaned back in her chair, the usual defensive wall in her eyes already starting to rise. About what? I didn't waste time. I slid the first photo across the table, Derek and her, standing outside that apartment building, her hand on his arm. Her breath hitched, just barely. She didn't look at me. I don't know what you're. Look at the damn photo, Rachel. I kept my voice steady, colder than I meant it to be. This is the first of many. She took the photo, her hands trembling for just a second before she straightened up. But she still tried to deny it. This isn't what you think. It's nothing. We were talking. I didn't flinch. I slid the next set of papers across the table. Receipts from hotels, retreat charges, credit card statements. All the things I couldn't ignore anymore. The timeline was there, clear as day. It was all I needed to connect the dots. Do you think I'm stupid? I asked, my voice rising just enough to make her meet my eyes. These are your charges. The places you've been. The things you've spent our money on. How long do you think I would let this go? She looked at the papers, her face going pale. The reality hit her. But still, she tried to fight it. I wasn't thinking, okay, she said quickly, but there was no conviction behind her words anymore. It was just, there were times I needed to escape. You weren't there for me, Jack. You don't see me anymore. I shook my head. No, don't turn this on me. You made choices. You crossed a line. Her eyes welled up, and I could see it. She was breaking. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook, not this time. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, and she pushed the papers aside. I'm sorry, okay? I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't keep living like this. I felt invisible. I needed someone to see me. I leaned in, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles were white. I wanted to shout, to rage at her, but something kept me still. If I let her off easy, if I let her twist this around and make me the bad guy, it wouldn't end. I needed control. I needed to finish this. I pulled out my phone, opened the neighborhood group chat, where people in town shared everything from news to gossip, and hit send. The photos, the receipts, everything. The notifications went off immediately, and I could feel her tension rise. What the hell did you just do? She snapped, standing up, her face flushed with panic. You can't. I can, Rachel. You made your bed. Now you're going to lie in it. My voice was quiet but strong, like a slow burn. People need to know what kind of person you really are. Her face crumpled, her eyes red as she glanced at the screen. Jack, please. But I didn't want her apologies. I didn't need her guilt. What I needed was to stop her from dragging me and Ben into her mess any longer. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You'll never drag Ben into this. You're not going to keep him caught in the middle of your crap anymore, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. That's over. You can stay away from him for good. Rachel's shoulders shook as she backed away from the table, tears spilling down her cheeks. But I didn't move. I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. I had watched this train wreck coming for so long, trying to convince myself that it wasn't real. But the truth was, it had been there all along. I couldn't change that now. She looked at me, her voice barely a whisper. I never wanted this to happen. You did this, Rachel. You made the choices. You didn't care what it would do to Ben, to me, to everything we built. You've been making those choices for a long time. The weight of it all hit me, but I didn't let it show. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet resolve. I was done. She crumpled, her sobs echoing in the room, but I couldn't be dragged into her storm anymore. I was taking my life back, and I wasn't looking back. Don't make me regret doing this, I said, my voice soft but final. She didn't respond, just collapsed into herself, a wreck of emotion and guilt. But there was no going back now. The days after Rachel moved out were a blur of normalcy. I spent my mornings at the shop, working like I always did. The hum of the engine, the sharp smell of oil and rubber, kept me grounded. But at night, when the quiet settled in, that's when everything hit me. I was alone, and it wasn't the kind of alone I'd gotten used to. This was different. Ben seemed to be doing okay, though. He didn't ask much about Rachel at first. I guess he could sense the tension, the space she'd left behind. But after a few days, the questions started. One afternoon, I picked him up from school, and he was unusually quiet in the car. Dad? He said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Yeah, buddy. Why's Mom? Staying somewhere else? I felt a lump form in my throat. I had been dreading this moment, but it was time to tell him. I glanced over at him, trying to keep it simple. Well, buddy, sometimes people make bad choices, and when they do, there are consequences. Your mom made some choices that hurt our family, and she's staying in a different place right now. He was quiet, processing it. I could tell he didn't fully understand, but he didn't press. Is she coming back? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, fighting the lump in my throat. I don't know, Ben, but we're okay, all right? I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. He nodded, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes, the kind that a kid shouldn't have to carry. Rachel had been calling every day, sometimes multiple times. At first, I didn't pick up. Then it turned into texts. Long apologies, begging me to forgive her, telling me she was sorry for everything. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. There was no point in dragging it out. I didn't need to hear her plead for forgiveness. I had already moved past that stage. I didn't have to be the guy she ran to when she screwed up. Not anymore. The shop was busy. Word had spread around town, and people seemed to take pity on me. Maybe it was the whole small-town sympathy thing, but I didn't care. Business was booming. People were coming in, asking about cars I hadn't even seen in years, and I was making more money than I had in months. It felt good to be busy. It felt good to focus on something I could control. But it also felt weird, like everyone was treating me like I was some kind of victim. I wasn't, though. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. But sometimes, it was hard to ignore. I heard from a few of Rachel's friends, too. Some of them had reached out, offering condolences, asking if there was anything they could do. They were supportive, some of them, anyway. But I could feel the distance from others. It was like they didn't know how to act around me anymore, like they were uncomfortable, like I had some kind of disease. It didn't bother me much. I had enough on my plate with Ben and the shop. But it did make me realize how much Rachel's actions had affected everything. The friends I thought we had, the people who had once been part of our circle, some of them were already backing away from her. She'd made a mess of everything, and now, she was paying for it. It was a quiet kind of satisfaction. Maybe that made me a little cold, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine. I wasn't going to keep pretending she hadn't broken this family, had broken me. Ben and I spent more time together. We kept it simple, nothing fancy, just trying to make the best of what we had. We took walks around the neighborhood, spent more time working on the bikes in the garage, and I taught him how to change the oil on an old truck. He didn't say much, but I could see the comfort in those small moments. Rachel called once more, a week after she'd moved out. I didn't pick up. A message came through, but I didn't read it. I didn't need to. I knew what it would say, more apologies, more guilt trips. But that was over. What was left to say? Ben needed stability. He needed to see me strong. He needed to know that things would be okay, even if they didn't look like they used to. So, that's what I focused on. I didn't have time for Rachel's drama anymore. I didn't have the energy to go back and forth with her. She had made her choices, and now, I was going to focus on the things that really mattered, my son, my business, and myself. And I wasn't going to let anyone or anything take that from me. The meeting with Sarah was a blur of legal jargon, but I wasn't too concerned with that. I just wanted to make sure I was doing things right. My stomach had been tied in knots ever since Rachel moved out, and now, everything was starting to fall into place. Sarah looked over everything I'd brought in, photos, receipts, bank statements, the tracker data. She didn't seem surprised. In fact, when she looked up at me, she had this kind of satisfied smile, like she knew she'd seen cases like mine before. "Jack, this is good," she said, tapping the stack of papers on her desk. "You've been meticulous with the evidence. This will give us a strong case for custody. We'll go for full custody of Ben, and we'll get it." I nodded, trying not to let the weight of her words sink in too much. Full custody. I had been focused on just getting through the days, but now, I had to think about Ben's future. I had to make sure I was the one providing him with a life that didn't include the mess Rachel had made of everything. Sarah moved to the next part of the discussion. "Rachel's lawyer will try to fight this, but from what I've seen, you've got the upper hand. The affair, the financial mismanagement, it's all coming to light. It's going to be hard for her to argue her way out of this." I didn't feel any relief, though. I wasn't looking for a victory. I was looking for stability. For Ben. For us. The divorce was just a step toward that. After the meeting, I was walking back to my truck when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Derek, can we talk?" I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when the words, "Can we talk?" flashed across the screen, I knew what was coming. Derek had probably seen the photos by now. Everyone in town had. I wasn't exactly shocked. He'd been involved in this mess, whether he'd want to admit it or not. I thought about it for a while, the possibility of ignoring it. But I didn't want to drag this out. I wasn't interested in dragging it through any more mud than it already had been. I typed back, "Where and when?" He answered almost immediately. "How about tomorrow, noon, at the coffee shop on Main?" I agreed. No point in avoiding it. But I wasn't going into that meeting with any illusions. I wasn't going to get wrapped up in some apology that wouldn't change a damn thing. The next day, I walked into the coffee shop 5 minutes early. I wasn't nervous. I had nothing to prove. Derek was already sitting in the corner, sipping a coffee, looking uncomfortable. He stood up when he saw me. There was this tight, forced smile on his face, like he thought maybe that would make this all go away. "Jack," he said, extending his hand. I didn't shake it. I just sat down across from him. No pleasantries. "What's this about?" Derek sighed, his face pinched with regret. I wanted to apologize. I know I messed up. I never meant to hurt you, man. I should have stayed out of it." I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, waiting for something more, something real. But there was nothing. Just excuses, just words. I don't want your apology, Derek, I said, cutting him off. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't fix anything. Rachel made her choices, and you were part of it. I don't need to hear it from you. He looked down, shifting in his seat. I get it, man. I really do. I don't want things to be like this between us. I shook my head, my frustration building. You don't get it. It's not about us anymore. It's about my son. It's about my family. You're not part of that anymore. Don't make it harder than it already is. Derek opened his mouth to say something else, but I held up my hand. I don't need anything from you. Not an apology, not a friendship, nothing. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought maybe he'd try again. But he didn't. He just nodded, defeated. All right, I get it. I stood up, and without another word, I walked out of the coffee shop. I wasn't going to let Derek, or Rachel, or anyone else drag me back into their mess. I had Ben to think about. I had our future to focus on. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of work. I didn't hear from Rachel or Derek again, but I wasn't waiting for their calls. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. The case was moving forward, and I knew that soon, everything would be settled. What mattered was Ben. What mattered was giving him the life I hadn't been able to give him before, a life where he didn't have to pick up the pieces of his mother's mistakes. And that was all I needed to focus on now. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't feel any relief. No rush of freedom, no sense of closure. It was just done. The court ruled in my favor, and I was granted full custody of Ben. Rachel, meanwhile, was given supervised visitation. The rules were clear. She couldn't have been unsupervised unless she could prove she was stable. The judge didn't believe she could be trusted with him on her own, not after everything that came to light. Rachel didn't take it well, of course. She showed up at the courthouse with a look of disbelief, like the whole world had wronged her. But she lost, and I wasn't going to let her drag us through another round of back and forth. The real test came a few weeks later, at a local charity event. Ben and I had gone because I'd promised him we could go together. It was one of those small-town things, a community event to raise money for the local fire department. There were booths, music, and people I barely knew but had to wave at. I didn't expect Rachel to show up. But there she was, standing near the back, pacing like a lion caged in her own rage. She spotted me right away, and before I could even turn to walk in the other direction, she was on me. "Jack, I need to talk to Ben," she demanded, her voice shrill, too loud for the setting. People glanced over, sensing the tension building. Ben was standing beside me, looking between us, his brow furrowed. I could tell he was confused, his eyes darting to Rachel like he wasn't sure if he should be afraid or just annoyed. "Mom, I don't want to," Ben started to say, but Rachel interrupted him, her voice growing louder. "Ben, please, just a few minutes. I need to talk to you." She stepped forward, reaching for him, but I stepped in between them before she could lay a hand on him. "Rachel, you can't do this," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my chest felt tight. "You're not supposed to have him unsupervised." She was shaking, her face flushed with frustration. "You can't keep him from me forever. I'm his mother, Jack. You can't just erase me from his life." Her words were starting to attract attention. People were starting to turn and watch. Some of the older folks in the crowd gave me sympathetic looks, probably wondering if they should step in. But this was my fight, and I wasn't going to let it turn into a public spectacle. "I'm not erasing you, Rachel. You did that. You made choices that hurt this family, and you're the one that needs to face the consequences." Her eyes filled with anger, then something else, something raw and desperate. She tried to push past me, but I held my ground. "You're not seeing him without supervision," I repeated, my voice still level. "Not like this. Not here. Not ever again unless it's through the proper channels." She looked at me, pleading, her face twisted with emotion. "Please, Jack, I'm begging you. I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix this. Don't shut me out like this. You're just punishing me." I could feel the eyes on us, and I knew she wasn't going to back down, not until she had an audience. I had no intention of letting her put on a show for anyone. "Rachel, you need to leave," I said. "I'm not going to let you use Ben as your emotional crutch anymore. You've had your chance. Now, if you won't leave, I'm calling the police." Her face drained of color. She hesitated, her hands shaking at her sides. The crowd around us had quieted, waiting for her to react. She looked at me one last time, her expression a mixture of hurt and rage, and then, without another word, she stormed off, muttering something under her breath. Ben didn't say anything, but I could see it in his eyes. He was relieved. I knew he didn't want that scene. He didn't want any part of it. I stood there for a moment, watching her go, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing. Rachel wasn't going to get to disrupt our lives anymore. Later that afternoon, I took Ben to the park. We didn't talk much on the way there, but it didn't matter. We didn't need to fill every silence. We just needed to be there, together. At the park, I watched him climb the jungle gym, laughing as he reached the top and threw his arms wide like he had just conquered the world. For a second, it felt like everything was normal again, like we were just two people who had nothing to prove, just a father and his son, enjoying the day. We spent hours there. I pushed him on the swings, I helped him build a fort out of sticks, and we just talked about anything and everything. He didn't ask about Rachel again, and that was fine. I wasn't going to push him to talk about her, not unless he was ready. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to protect Ben. He didn't have to carry any more of Rachel's mistakes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life again. A year had passed since the divorce. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be either. Ben and I had settled into a rhythm, a new life that felt more solid with each passing day. Our little house, the one Rachel had always thought was too small, had become home in a way it never had been before. It was quiet at night, just the two of us, but it wasn't empty. Not anymore. The business was growing, and I wasn't just putting out fires anymore. I was getting ahead, even taking on bigger projects. Word had spread around town, and people were starting to look at me differently. Not with pity, like they used to, but with respect. That felt good. Ben was thriving too. He was excelling in school, making friends, getting more confident. His grades were better than they'd been when Rachel was around. I don't know if it was the stability or the absence of the constant tension in the house, but something had clicked. He was finally able to be a kid again. I was sitting at the kitchen table one morning when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, my lawyer. She'd kept me updated on the divorce proceedings, but this was different. It was about Rachel. Just letting you know, Rachel's seeing someone. She's moving on, Jack. I thought you should know. I read it twice, then put my phone down without much thought. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no relief. I just didn't care. Rachel could do whatever she wanted. She'd made her choices. I had mine. And those choices had brought me to a place I could be proud of. I looked out the window, where Ben was playing in the yard. He was climbing the tree house we'd built together the summer before. I had no idea how he got so big, so fast. It was like one minute he was a little kid, asking for help every 5 seconds, and the next, he was up there, reaching the top without even looking back. I smiled to myself, watching him laugh as he stood on the platform, arms wide like he was king of the world. I thought about all the times I'd worried about being a good enough father, about whether I was doing it right. But watching him now, so full of life, so sure of himself, I knew we were okay. Better than okay. There were days when I'd catch myself thinking about the past, about Rachel and what went wrong. But those days were getting fewer. What mattered now was the life I was building with Ben. The trust we had, the quiet moments we shared, the way we leaned on each other without even needing to say it. I walked outside, my boots crunching on the gravel as I headed toward the treehouse. Ben looked down at me, grinning. "You coming up, Dad?" he asked, excitement in his voice. I shook my head, smiling. "I think I'll let you have that one. But I'll be right here, okay?" He nodded, climbing higher with ease. I leaned against the tree, watching him as the wind rustled the leaves around us. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Rachel or what I'd lost. I was just looking at Ben, at the boy I was proud to call my son. And I knew, deep down, that we had everything we needed. Together. The future felt different now. It felt like something I could shape, not something I was waiting for. And as I stood there, watching Ben climb higher, I realized just how much I'd learned over the past year. Not about fixing cars or handling business, but about what really mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.